I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. There are some national parks that only runners can appreciate. Now, that's not to say that everybody can't enjoy a national park, but there's something about being able to go to multiple trails and explore more parts of a national park than you can when you're hiking, or obviously if you don't see any of the trails at all. You get to experience so much beauty in such a short amount of time that I think it's the best way to explore a national park personally. And for most people, they don't have multiple weeks that they can explore a park or a place. So maximizing the time that they have in a place is absolutely essential. So after a 3-month-long road trip to 16 national parks across pretty much every state on the West Coast, and having visited many national parks on the East Coast as well in prior years, I'm here to bring you what I think are the 7 best national parks for runners. Keep in mind, this list will fluctuate as time goes on and as I visit other parks. And I honestly wouldn't doubt if you look in the future and I have an updated video with a whole new set of rankings, because as I go back to places, I get to experience new things. I go to new national parks, so this list is always changing, and there's just so much beauty in the US that it's really hard to put a ranking on it. I stared at that map right there for longer than I care to admit, to be honest, trying to make this list for you, so I hope you appreciate it. By the way, my name is Kyle Cash, also known as the Travel Runner, and I've been travel running for about 7 years now, around the world and in the US, so that's why I'm super excited to bring these trails to you. Also, if you'd prefer to just have a quick PDF guide to running in 12 different national parks, well, I did the hard work for you. So check the link at the top of the description and I can email that right to you. So with that said, let's actually get to this list. So this first park I actually didn't know existed until I was in my mid-20s. I remember seeing some photo one day on Facebook and I was just clicking through and I saw these absolutely gorgeous mountainous spires coming up from a plain with this shed. I just hinted what park it is if you know your parks well. And it just honestly took me by complete surprise. And then when I found out in the US, I knew I needed to visit it. And once I did, it didn't disappoint. And that park is none other than Grand Teton National Park. I didn't have time to run all the trails I wanted to when I visited. It was on a trip with my dad and my stepmom, and we spent a lot of time exploring with them, which was a lot of fun and a unique experience that I'm appreciative of. But we did have time to do the Delta Lake Trail, and it is probably one of my favorite trails in the US now. While it's not an official National Park Service trail, which you'll see signs stating along the way, you can easily find it on all trails, which I'll link in the description below. And honestly, this is my can't miss trail in this park. The view you get at the top is absolutely unreal. Just be prepared for some scrambling, some steep uphills, and probably some shortness of breath by the time you get to the top. But the reward at the top is well worth it, so I highly recommend doing this trail. Which, by the way, I made a quick video highlighting the Delta Lake Trail, which you can see here. So if you do want to learn more about that, I recommend checking out that video for more. So securely on this list is Grand Teton at number 7. This next park, I'll be honest, was not even on my radar, but is on my fiance Caitlin's radar, and we got to go there in 2023 with her and her family. Now, prior to that trip, Caitlin and I headed up and spent a few days in this park and had an absolute blast exploring the trails with epic coastal views, to be honest with you, which completely surprised me. I didn't do much research into it prior to, so that is one reason it surprised me, but it was a very, very good surprise. And that park is Acadia National Park, that nice little gem tucked away up in Maine. Now, don't get me wrong, Acadia is by no means a hidden gem or a hidden park in the US. It sees about 4 million visitors a year, which is 7th out of the 63 parks. But I personally did not know much about it, and for anyone that is similar to me, you'll feel the same way when you visit. It completely blew me away, especially Cadillac Mountain. Caitlin and I ran up at sunrise, which helped us avoid the car fee, which is nice. You don't have to schedule a time. You get to just run up at your pace. And the reward at the top with the sunset coming up and it being one of the first sunrises that you actually see in the US just made it all the more worthwhile. As well, for the more adventurous, there's the Beehive and Precipice trails. They're not exactly running trails. You will do a bit of climbing. There's some rungs and things that you have to follow. The Precipice Trail is more difficult than the Beehive Trail, but they are a ton of fun to do. We got to do the Beehive Trail. Precipice Trail, I've read good things, but we didn't do it on our trip. But future trip, count me in. So for me, the incredible trails here land Acadia solidly at number 6 on this list. So in 2023, the company I work for was having a company retreat. Now for me, I'd never worked for a company that had a company retreat. So it did not matter to me what we did. We could have gone to Red Lobster and I would have been happy. Instead, we rode UTVs around the mountains and deserts of Utah and visited a national park. Now, if you're familiar with the national parks, you've narrowed it down to one of 5. Now, I've had the opportunity to visit 2 of the 5 in Utah, with the other 3 being on the list, of course. But this one was what realistically kickstarted my love of running in national parks and wanting to visit so many of the national parks and experience them through running. And that's Zion National Park. Now, I didn't get to run on that trip in particular because I was with my company and my coworkers, none of them really being runners, maybe a handful of them. But just seeing those canyon walls, the reds and the oranges, and just everything about that park had me walking around probably with my mouth open, slack-jawed like I was a caveman, and looking pretty stupid probably to most people, but to me, I was absolutely loving it. So Caitlin and I went back and ran some of the trails, my favorite being the Watchman Trail. The beginning is a steady uphill to the top where you have a perfect view of the Watchman basically the entire way. And if you know me, you know I love a good uphill. The challenge plus the reward you get at the top is always worth it. There's a nice little loop at the top too, which gives you great views out over the canyon and the rest of the national park for the most part. And then you get to absolutely bomb the downhill on a fun single track. Occasionally widens a little bit, but for the most part, single track. And it's just a ton of fun. It's one of my favorite trails in any national park there is. Also, not the most runnable, but always has to be mentioned, there's the Angels Landing Trail. If you have a big fear of heights, you may not enjoy this one. I don't particularly, but I'm still very aware when death is only inches away by a 1,000-foot fall on either side. So I was definitely wary. But overall, highly recommend this trail if you do have the time. If you did do it, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Did you think it was sketchy? Did you think it was easy? Give me your thoughts on it. And if you're crazy enough, in my opinion, to have run it, let me know that too. I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, landing at number 5 on this list is Zion National Park, one of my favorite national parks personally. Have you ever had a place where someone hyped it up so much that there's no way it could actually live up to the expectations? Normally, if you're like most people, it ends with disappointment. Not because the place is even bad, but because the expectations were so high that there's no way the place could have actually lived up to them. It's happened to me more times than I can count, and I've learned to temper my expectations a bit with it. But for this park, it's pretty hard not to buy into the hype. And that's the Grand Canyon. It's the first place that I can confidently say over-delivered on already high expectations. I mean, when you think of the gold standard of attractions in the USA, the Grand Canyon's it. I mean, people travel thousands of miles from around the world just to see this. So it's pretty hard to top. So for runners, even more so. There's over 200 miles to explore. There's also the rim to rim. So running from one rim to the other. There's also the rim to rim to rim, which is 48 miles. So running one rim to the other rim, back to the other rim. So there's tons that you can do here, and their trail runners flock to this area, especially to do the rim to rim. That is a super famous one that's on my list, but we'll get some training in before we get there. It's not quite ready for that one yet. Instead, Caitlin and I did the Bright Angel Trail. Now, in total, this could be a 16-mile trail. It starts at the south rim and heads on down to the river. But you can realistically turn around whenever you want, which is what Caitlin and I did. We did around 6.5 miles. I believe it had around 2,100 feet of elevation gain. Obviously, all of that came on the way back up, so it's actually 2,100 feet in around 3 miles. So this is going to be a steep one, but what else did you honestly expect out of the Grand Canyon? I mean, yeah, if you're looking at a list of the best national parks, period, Grand Canyon is always going to be on that list. And that's included for runners, and that's why it lands at number 4 on this list. If there's a national park that, as a trail runner, I feel is talked about hands down the most, it's gotta be this next one. I just visited a few months ago, and it was national park number 10 on that national park running road trip. That's a mouthful, let's say that 5 times fast. National park running road trip, national park running road trip, national park running road trip, national park running road trip. Okay, bit easier than I thought it was. And once I visited, I could easily see why it was talked about so much. It's close to one of the biggest trail running towns and cities in the US. It's got over 300 miles of trails, and the views are just absolutely ridiculous. And that would be, you guessed it, Rocky Mountain National Park. I'm honestly a little jealous as someone who lives in Ohio. We don't have many trails, and the ones we do are relatively flat. They're all flat. Meanwhile, there's this giant playground an hour away from Denver, especially if you live in Boulder, where you already have a great selection of trails, and it's just right in your backyard and you get to play in it all day. It makes me a little green with envy, I won't lie, and that got worse once I actually visited the park. We didn't have a ton of time in the park, so we tried to maximize what we could do. My favorite trail that we got to do was Deer Mountain. Again, this is one of those classic uphills. You get the view at the top, then back downhill. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I love those types of trails. And the view at the top, you truly realize how massive this park is, and this is only one small part of it. And don't even get me started on that downhill. I absolutely loved bombing down that thing and flying as fast as I could. Now, don't get me wrong, I had to stop off occasionally for uphill hikers. Always follow trail etiquette and let the uphill hikers go. They have a harder time. But even with that, I had a great time. So if you're going to go, I recommend going earlier in the morning. You'll avoid those crowds and get to enjoy more of the trail. And I can't even imagine what that would be like. And again, this is just one trail in a massive park. One small trail in a massive system of 300 miles. So get there, enjoy it. There's a reason on this list. Rocky Mountain National Park, you're awesome. Ooh, I may have been sleeping on Grand Teton or Acadia, but this next one, I've been dreaming about. First, I've always loved dinosaurs. Seems unrelated, stick with me. And the dense green rainforest that I saw in this park is what I always pictured dinosaurs roaming around in. So once I found out this park existed and it was in the United States, I knew I had to visit. I was like 7 years old, cut me some slack. So I've dropped a few hints here, so you should have a good guess by now. So drum roll.
What the hell's going on over here?
Olympic National Park at number 2. It's also the 10th most visited national park, so I like to think most other people are satisfying that inner 7-year-old as well. This park was number 6 on that trip that I mentioned earlier, and it was honestly one of my favorites, mainly because I didn't realize how diverse it was. In one day, we went from running on a ridge, giant mountains, clouds around us, to 30 minutes later, we're in the heart of a dense rainforest, running along a damp red trail with giant leaves and greenery all around us. It was honestly incredible. My favorite trail in the park was the Solduck Falls Trail. Not the shorter 1 mile option, but instead the 6 mile option that goes via the Lover's Lane and B Loop and starts at the Solduck Falls Hot Springs Resort. This trail is a little bit longer, so in my opinion, it's a bit more fun. You get to experience more of the park. You get those classic Olympic National Park trails, which I think are incredible personally. And having the falls midway through is a nice little reward until you finish on a high note as you run back through that same forest basically that you came through, except on the opposite side of the river. Like some of the others on this list, I have a separate video for the Solduck Falls Trail. So if you'd like to learn more about that trail, definitely check that video out. I think you'll like it. And yeah, that puts Olympic National Park at number 2 and takes us to our final national park for runners. I'll be honest, I did zero research on this national park before visiting. Caitlin, on the other hand, went all in on the research and did an awesome job. I looked at nothing and wanted to do this as my own little experiment where I basically get to experience firsthand with my own eyes, not through videos, images, or anything else. And if I'm also being honest, the experiment went perfectly. So much so that this park left a lasting impression on me. So much that we could be talking about realistically anything. Italian cuisine. And I'll interrupt you mid-sentence to start being a proselytizer to ask you, excuse me, do you have a moment for me to talk to you about Glacier National Park? So yeah, you see it, number 1 on this list for me is Glacier National Park. Seriously, the views absolutely blew me away at this place. I was not expecting it, and when we arrived, just the mountains and every bit of the scenery was absolutely astounding. I can't stop talking about it. And when you have trails like the Avalanche Trail, the Highline Trail, a personal favorite of mine, It's pretty hard to beat. These are great trails to run, and that's only a fraction of them. I didn't even get a chance to explore some more of the ones that exist in other parts of the park simply because of where we stayed. So definitely recommend visiting. Highline Trail especially is one of my favorite trails in the national park, if not my favorite national park. I know I've said that a few times in this video, but with each of them, I mean it. They are absolutely astounding for runners. So yeah, number one for me, Glacier National Park for sure. Chef's kiss, absolutely. Also, if you'd like to see more on Glacier National Park, definitely check out this video on the Highline Trail. It'll give you a good overview of exactly those views I was talking about. And that's my list of the best national parks for runners. But realistically, it's hard to pare this list down to 7. There's plenty of deserving parks like Redwood National Park, Great Basin, and many others that deserve to be on this list too. And I recommend visiting them all so you can find which ones you like best. One way to get you started is to check out my national park running playlist. Here, I'm adding each video that I've taken in different national parks and some of the best trails in the parks for people like you so that you can see what it's like for a runner and what trails are runnable, what ones aren't, and what you can expect reasonably when you are visiting these places. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you would like to get 12 of these guides in a PDF sent straight to you, just click that link at the top of the description and I'll send it to you straight through email. Easy as that. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helps you out. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification button so that you don't miss any travel running videos from me, just like this one. And until next time, run fast, travel slow.